It's Ash from SuperVideos back for another video for The Last of Us on HBO. On this video, we're going to be taking a look at the penultimate episode of Season 1, Episode 8, which is called When We Are in Need, which is obviously the episode where we get introduced to David and his men. Now, particularly what we're going to talk about is the possibility of the brutal Ellie versus David fight scene being skipped or toned down. Now, obviously, spoiler alert for those of you who have not played the game, because I will go through details that will spoil big parts of this story for you. So, with that spoiler warning out of the way, stay tuned. We'll be right back to break it all down. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. So of course, as we've seen from the previous episodes, the adapted material lacks the level of violence and action that it did in the game. So it's no secret that the HBO adaptation is reducing violence as part of its overall theme of reducing violence on the show. They are also toning down the number of infected and monsters that we see, the number of fights with those monsters that we see, and generally speaking, the action sequences and fight scenes are reduced significantly. However, when we look at the previous episodes, they have kept the key scenes that are in the story, even if they have more violence than they're comfortable with. Some of those examples are the scene with Joel and Sarah, which had gun violence, the scene with the hunters, which had a lot of gun violence, and the fight with the infected and the bloater and clickers in that particular story with the hunters. And I think the story involved with David and his men is one of those key stories that you just need to keep the same, because if you take the violence away, it reduces the impact and it takes away from some of the effectiveness it has on the overall story. And as part of that, the cannibalism aspect of David's group must remain the same, and it appears that it will. We obviously know that David is going to introduce himself to Ellie in much the same way that we saw in the game, and we are going to see a situation where David is going to invite Ellie and he's going to be all friendly and everything, but obviously he's not going to have good intentions. They are going to keep the stuff with Ellie trying to escape and all of that, because there is a scene where David has like a butcher knife and he's either trying to kill or scare Ellie, which is identical to the scene that was there in the game. And this is obviously the moment where to David it was revealed that Ellie has a bite. So all of that is kept the same as the game. Also, based on previews, the episode will have a scene with a place on fire, like some sort of a bar or restaurant, and we see David just standing in the middle of that restaurant, which is burning down. Just like the same type of scene we had in the game, where the epic fight between David and Ellie was, which I have a couple screenshots of that you can see. The previews also show Ellie grabbing a huge knife, which is likely from the same sequence that matches the game, because in the game, when we had the David and Ellie fight, we did have Ellie trying to grab a knife to kill David. So that's probably connecting directly to the scene with Ellie finding the knife in this upcoming episode. So we know that David and Ellie are going to have some sort of a fight, but it is unclear if it's going to be as brutal as the game, with Ellie repeatedly stabbing David in the face. It was just so brutal, so gruesome, so impactful in the game, and I feel like to do that scene justice, they need to keep it the same. But obviously, we're going to have to wait and see whether that gets toned down or skipped altogether. Because in a way, if they keep it, it does really emphasize Ellie's anger, and that adds to the impact of the scene, in my opinion. But something that actually proves that they might actually be doing that scene just as brutally as it was in the game relates to something that the actress who plays Ellie, Bella Ramsey, said about shooting this particular episode. She said that it was challenging and brutal. So that's obviously pointing towards it being just as violent and brutal as the game, which is definitely great news because if they do it justice, then the impact is translated fairly well in terms of how impactful it was in the game and how impactful it's going to be in the show. However, the scene in the game with Joel interrupting and stopping Ellie when she was stabbing David might actually be changed slightly, since we see what appears to be the show's version of this, but it's in a different location. We see Joel and Ellie outside. So they're probably outside of the building that's burning, but we obviously do see blood on Ellie's face, which is probably from fight with David. There's also a possibility that they might just have Ellie injure David and just leave him to burn instead. That is, of course, if they go the non-violent route. But I think the HBO TV adaptation's penultimate season 1 episode, When We Are in Need, will likely adapt the brutal Ellie versus David story from The Last of Us, but it's unclear whether it'll be as violent as the game, or if it'll be toned down to emphasize the theme of reducing violence. I think if we're being realistic, it'll be a 50-50 situation where parts of it will be just as brutal, but other parts will be toned down a little bit. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through in this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.